A ghost ship sits locked in silent ice for over a century. This is the true story of a vessel, discovered perfectly preserved. Its crew still aboard, as if time itself stopped. By the end, you will understand the full, chilling story of what happened to them, and why this frozen tomb is one of archaeology's greatest finds. We will uncover how they lived their final days, and what clues they left behind in the eternal cold. What does it feel like to look upon a moment frozen forever? The year was 2014, and the remote, unforgiving landscape of the Canadian Arctic held a secret it was finally ready to surrender. A team of archaeologists, surveying the ever-shifting ice in the Northwest Passage, noticed an unusual silhouette against the stark white expanse. It was the hull of a ship, remarkably intact, its wooden ribs cradled not by water, but by a solid tomb of ice. As they drew closer, the vessel's name became visible, carved into the stern, weathered but unmistakable, the HMS Erebus. This was a name whispered in history books, a ship that had vanished without a trace 169 years earlier. The ice had preserved it with an almost reverent precision. The mast still stood, though tilted by the relentless pressure of the frozen sea. Ropes hung stiffly from the yards, and a dusting of eternal snow lay across the deck. Peering through the thick, frosted glass of a cabin window, a researcher saw shadows within, shapes that were unmistakably human, seated or slumped as if in mid-conversation or rest. It was a moment suspended, a Victorian-era expedition halted in the blink of an eye. The discovery sent shockwaves through the archaeological world and captivated the global public. Here was not just a shipwreck, but a time capsule, a direct portal to one of history's most enduring maritime mysteries. The immediate question, however, was profound and solemn. This was not merely an artifact, it was a gravesite. Every step onto that deck, every item examined, would be a delicate interaction with the final moments of 129 souls. The team moved with a hushed reverence, understanding that their technology, from sonar to careful ice-melting tools, was now a key to the past that must be turned with the utmost respect. Inside that frozen hull, the silence told a story more chilling than any ghost tale. The crew of the Erebus was found not scattered, but positioned with a dreadful, telling order. Some men were discovered at their assigned posts, a helmsman's hand still near the frozen wheel, as if maintaining a watch that would never end. Others were in their hammocks, wrapped tightly in woolen blankets, perhaps seeking a final, feverish sleep. A small group was found together in the lower deck, clustered around a long cold stove, a silent council in the deepening cold. Their bodies, preserved by the Arctic's deep freeze, became a unique forensic record. Analysis of their bones and tissues revealed men in their 20s and 30s, once strong but showing the brutal marks of their ordeal. Advanced scans showed telltale signs of advanced scurvy, a disease from lack of vitamin C that causes joints to ache, old wounds to reopen, and teeth to loosen. Their bones also bore the microscopic fractures of severe malnutrition and the physiological stress of constant, brutal cold. The immediate cause of death for most was likely a combination of hypothermia and organ failure, a slow shutting down as the ship became an icebox. But there was another, more disturbing clue. Testing of hair and nail samples revealed dangerously high levels of lead. The source, the expedition's prized technology, thousands of soldered tin cans meant to hold their food, and the ship's own freshwater distillation system lined with lead. They were being slowly poisoned by the very supplies meant to save them, suffering from confusion, pain, and weakness long before the cold finished its work. Their final days can be pieced together from the artifacts left behind: a half-written letter home, the ink long faded, a pocket watch stopped at a specific hour, a pair of spectacles folded neatly on a ledger, a small carved toy animal, perhaps belonging to a sailor thinking of his children. These items speak of lives interrupted, of men clinging to routine and memory as the world outside turned solid. The most haunting question is why they stayed. The lifeboats were gone, suggesting some had attempted to leave, but these men remained. Perhaps they were too ill to travel, designated to stay with the ship. Perhaps they believed until the very end that rescue would come, that the ice would relent. Their frozen poses, a man reaching for a crate, Another curled protectively are not gestures of panic, but of exhausted resignation. They depict the final, quiet act of a tragedy that unfolded not with a bang, but with a slow, inexorable whisper of cold and silence. While the crew's final moments are a human tragedy, the ship they left behind is a historian's miracle. The Erebus itself, encased in its icy vault, is one of the most perfectly preserved 19th century vessels ever discovered. Built as a bomb vessel, its hull was reinforced with extra timber to withstand the recoil of heavy mortars, a design that ironically made it ideal for the crushing pressures of polar ice. Stepping aboard is like stepping into a moment paused. The cold, dark water that flooded the lower decks eventually froze solid, creating an anaerobic environment, a place without oxygen that halted the processes of rot and rust that destroy most shipwrecks. This unique condition preserved materials typically lost to time, offering a three-dimensional catalog of Victorian naval life. On the desks of the officers' cabins, brass navigational instruments sit exactly where they were laid down. A sextant for measuring the angle of the sun, a chronometer for keeping precise time at sea, and intricate charts still bear the pencil marks of their last calculations. In the captain's quarters, personal effects tell a quieter story. A writing slope holds sheets of paper, the ink now faded to a ghostly brown, but the elegant handwriting still speaks of reports meant for the Admiralty or perhaps a last letter to a loved one. Clothing hangs in lockers, woolen jackets and trousers frozen in the shapes of the men who wore them, while nearby, sealed ceramic jars still hold remnants of pickled vegetables and blocks of hardtack, the staple diet of a long voyage. Perhaps most telling are the mission-specific items. The Erebus was not on a simple exploration. It was a flagship of the Franklin expedition, tasked with finding the elusive Northwest Passage. Among the recovered artifacts are specialized equipment for magnetic observation, crucial for mapping the Earth's fields, and containers for collecting scientific samples. The discovery of officers' epaulettes with unique insignia and fine porcelain dinnerware painted with the expedition's own pattern underscores this was a voyage of immense national importance, carrying Britain's pride into the unknown. Even the ship's bell was recovered, its clear ring silenced for over a century, but its presence a symbol of order and routine. Each preserved item, from the grandest instrument to the most humble spoon, acts as a pixel in a larger picture. Together, they reconstruct not just a ship's layout, but the very rhythm of daily life, the hierarchy, the science, and the domesticity that existed aboard this wooden world before it was swallowed by the ice. This level of preservation is so complete, it allows us to touch the texture of history itself, to understand the tools they used, the clothes they wore, and the food they ate with intimacy usually reserved for novels, not archaeology. But with such a perfectly preserved scene, the question becomes unavoidable. What single, terrible event finally sealed their fate? The evidence points not to one dramatic catastrophe, but to a cascading series of failures, each theory offering a piece of the puzzle. The leading scientific explanation is a brutal convergence of bad luck and flawed preparation. The expedition's ships, the Erebus and its sister vessel, the Terror, became trapped in a vise of sea ice off King William Island in the late summer of 1846, a full month earlier than usual due to a period of extreme cold now known as the Little Ice Age. This was not a temporary setback, it was a death sentence. The ice that season was multi-year pack, incredibly dense and powerful, refusing to melt the following summer. Imagine your home slowly, inexorably being crushed by silent, white walls. The ships were strong, but not strong enough to withstand years of this pressure. Some researchers suggest a catastrophic hull breach from the ice finally forced the men onto the barren land in a desperate, doomed trek south. This aligns with Inuit oral histories that describe encountering starving men and finding one of the ships, likely the Terror, later crushed and sunk. The disease and lead poisoning we discussed earlier would have made any such march a staggering ordeal, crippling the crew long before the cold could. This theory of environmental entrapment and systemic failure is the most widely accepted, a tragedy of human ambition meeting an indifferent and vastly powerful natural world. Yet, gaps in the record fuel more speculative ideas. Some point to the scattered bones found on King William Island that show cut marks consistent with butchering, leading to a dark and controversial theory of cannibalism among the final survivors, a last resort in the face of starvation. While forensic evidence supports this grim possibility, it is seen as a symptom of the collapse, not its cause. More fringe explanations have flourished in the mystery's shadow. Could there have been a mutiny, a breakdown of order that doomed any coordinated rescue effort? The positioned bodies on the Erebus suggest discipline was maintained there, but we know less about the terror's final hours. Popular culture has occasionally leaned into the eerie setting, suggesting encounters with unknown Arctic phenomena or even supernatural forces, though these are stories born of the location's profound silence, not physical evidence. Modern science, however, is methodically filtering fact from folklore. Dendrochronology, the study of tree rings in the ship's timbers, confirms the age of the wood and the timeline of its construction. Ice core samples from the region detail the precise climatic hellscape the ship sailed into, confirming the severity of those frozen years. DNA analysis of the crew's remains is helping to identify individuals and map familial relationships, turning anonymous skeletons back into people with names and histories. Even the lead isotopes are being traced to their exact source in the solder of the canned food. Each data point narrows the scope of the mystery, yet the fundamental human question remains unanswered in full. We know how they died, in a technical sense, but the complete sequence of decisions, the final conversations, the moment hope truly faded, those are echoes the ice has not yet released. This unresolved narrative is what holds our fascination, a reminder that some stories, even when found, are never fully finished. The discovery of the Erebus does more than solve a mystery, it rewrites our relationship with history itself. For generations, the Franklin expedition was a cautionary tale of hubris, a story of arrogant Victorian explorers defeated by a world they failed to understand. The silent testimony of the ship and its crew forces a more nuanced and human view. We now see not just a failure of technology or maps, but a profound story of endurance. These men operated cutting-edge science under impossible conditions. They maintained discipline as their world turned to stone, and they faced an end that was slow, quiet, and terrifyingly patient. This changes how we view all historical exploration, recognizing the thin line between legendary success and forgotten tragedy often came down to luck, weather, or a single flawed decision. The ship is a memorial, yes, but not a static one. It is a monument to nature's ultimate, indifferent power, a force that can preserve a story for centuries with the same ease it can erase a life. This duality raises profound ethical questions for archaeologists and for us all. Is the Erebus primarily a gravesite, demanding we leave it undisturbed as a sacred resting place? Or is it a unique scientific resource, a library of the past whose secrets could teach us invaluable lessons about shipbuilding, medicine, and climate? The current approach, a careful blend of reverence and study, tries to honor both truths, but the tension remains. Every artifact raised is a piece of a life, and every decision to leave something in place is a choice to let some knowledge stay forever locked in the dark. As the Arctic ice continues to change, the ship's future is uncertain, making our stewardship of its story even more urgent. So we are left with a final, haunting reflection. In their last hours, as the cold seeped into the timbers and the last lamp guttered out, what were their thoughts? Were they of home and loved ones, of regret for the path taken, or was there a strange peace in the silence? More importantly, what would they want us, looking back from our warm, connected world, to learn from their frozen moment in time? Perhaps the lesson is not about conquering nature, but about humility in the face of its vastness, and about the fragile, incredible resilience of the human spirit, even in the deepest cold. What do you think they would tell us? Share your own thoughts on what this story means in the comments below.